Hello, I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Today's guest opens her TED Talk by asking her audience to imagine being 4 years old again. To picture ourselves building a tower only to have a classmate run past and knock it over. She describes all of the feelings likely to bubble up and the response of a kind, calm, compassionate educator who asks what happened and makes space for those feelings, listening, validating, and responding with empathy and compassion. She then goes on to invite us to reflect on how the adults around us responded when our towers tumbled, when things went wrong, and when we were distressed. Reflections like this aren't always easy. I know when I reflect, it can create a little bit of a knot in my tummy to think about my experiences as a child, which were much like yours, I imagine. There were great responses, there were imperfect human responses, and everything in between. It's not easy to reflect, and of course we can't change how we've been parented, but we can certainly, when we do reflect and understand more about how we were responded to as children, it's really important for at least a couple of reasons, many more, but two I really want to draw our attention to. We understand more about ourselves when we do consider how the adults in our lives responded to our own distress as a child, or if they responded at all. And secondly, we can reflect on how we respond as parents, teachers, and caring adults to the young people in our lives. The person that I've been talking about as I described the start of this TED Talk is the incredible Lael Stone. She's here to help us today to learn more about raising emotionally intelligent children. She is an educator, an author, a mother of three. She is a parenting counsellor who's worked with families for over 20 years. She is the creator of Woodline Primary School, a new school based on emotional wellbeing and connection. She's passionate about supporting parents to understand their children, and today she joins us from Torquay in Victoria here in Australia. So, Lael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. That was a beautiful introduction.
Oh, well, I'm just so grateful to you and your incredible work, and I really love the ethos by which you work. Everything that you do, and there are more strings to your bow, is around connection and compassion, and this idea that when we can learn how to raise emotionally intelligent kids, and we can learn how to almost respond in ways that might not be the way we were responded to, but we can build our own skills as parents and teachers and even colleagues as well, can't we?
100%. I think it's such a beautiful question, and one that I love to pose whenever I'm talking to anybody about what was modeled to us, because whether we are aware of it or not, often we default what was done to us. And I think that it's really powerful to be curious about this question of how do we respond to children and why we respond the way we do. Because I think if we're going to change the way our future looks for our beautiful planet, we need to bring some more emotional awareness and some more trauma-informed practices to the table so that we can raise children who are connected to themselves, who are deeply compassionate, and who want to take care of this lovely earth that we're on.
I love that you've come to that point. Actually, it's funny that you talk about the earth and the planet and kids. And just as a very quick tangent, I've recently purchased some of those paper dishwashing sheets instead of the chemical-filled tablets. I sound like I'm doing a promotion now. I'm not. But I'm so excited about it because they've been so effective, and I feel like we're doing a good thing for the planet. We're doing a good thing for our own health in our home. It's more affordable. And when my daughter's friends came over to visit a couple of days ago, I was doing the dishwasher and I announced to them this change we'd made. And my husband goes, "Oh my gosh, Jodi, I cannot believe you are telling the girls about your new dishwasher sheets. I can't believe it." And they were actually really interested. And so, it's a small tangent, but, I think that they've got big hearts and they care more than we often can give them credit for, certainly more than Peter gives them credit for. And I talk about him with his permission. But yeah, I love that it's not just about what's happening in our homes. It's about the wider impact of what we do and the young people that we're raising, and the impact that they can have not only for their own mental health and happiness, but in their own relationships, families, and in the wider community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as evolution grows, we're meant to become more conscious or more aware each generation. And I, a bit like you, I have a lot of hope for the beautiful young people that are coming through. I have three kids who are 23, 20 and nearly 16, and their social awareness is amazing, but also their emotional intelligence is really profound. Like some of the stuff that we talk about or what they're navigating was nowhere near what I was doing when I was their age. And I love that there is a whole lot more awareness. And I think, as much as we can feel the challenges of technology and how fast our world is moving, I think the opportunity to have access to information, to learn, to grow is going to be a great service to us as humans, because I think the more information we get, the more we understand about the brain and the bodies and emotions and feelings and all those kind of things, then we can begin to change some of our stories as the parents and the adults, and then pass it on to our children, who then just have this innate knowing and being about them. And that is a really, really good thing.
It really is. And when children have an understanding of their physiology and about what they're feeling and about the comfortability of experiencing all feelings, even though we don't have to like them, that they're visitors, that they come and they go, and we're so much healthier for it. And yet I was an anxious kid. All I ever did was, when I felt uncomfortable, which was always anxiety, I would just ask my mum, and she would just reassure me it was all going to be okay. So that was very much an avoidance strategy, very much distracting myself, and we can perhaps get on to talking about distraction and the different ways that we all do, and especially our kids can deal with their feelings. But I really want to firstly go back to something you said earlier when you talked about a trauma-informed care and a trauma-informed approach. So for listeners, I recently released an episode on trauma, and that was with the president of the Blue Knot Foundation, which is an extraordinary organisation for anybody who needs some support with complex trauma or trauma in their lives. But trauma-informed, what do you mean when you're making reference to that, please, Lael?
Well, I think for me, trauma-informed is really around being curious enough, or actually being aware enough to be attuned to people, to see what is happening for them, and then be able to accommodate what that might feel like. So, one of the things when building my school was that we really wanted to be trauma informed, which means that we're taking a look at the children that are there, and we are having a think around, okay, if a child has got some trauma around separation, then how do we make this a safe place for them to be able to feel safe enough and to maybe work through what they've got to, so that they can be at school? Or perhaps we look at, if a child has had a big fright or a big scare, or there's been an acute trauma in their lives, then we're really hyper aware that big noises might feel threatening for them, or that, a lot of chaos in the classroom might feel big. So how do we make sure that they feel safe in their environment as well? And that might be they might need to wear headphones for a little bit, or they might need a lot of information before we do something new, and that helps them to feel safe. So I think for me, trauma informed is about attunement, actually, to the people around us, and to be curious always as to how is this landing for someone. Because I don't know, I've been working with families for nearly 20 years, and I think we all have trauma of different degrees. Some people have that big complex trauma where there's been a lot of unsafety, or there's been a lot of big things that have happened in their lives. Some people have that acute trauma of incidences or accidents that's happened. And then I think most of us have what I call kind of connection trauma, which is just things that happened to us when we were children, where we didn't get our needs met. Perhaps we were sent to our room when we got angry and we were left alone, and we created a bit of a story that says no one understands me, and that became like a little micro trauma. Or perhaps we got yelled at when we broke the vase by accident, and that kind of lodged in our bodies as such a big shock, and from then on we carried a story that says, oh gosh, I can never make a mistake because someone someone's going to get really angry with me. Like, I think we all have these little micro traumas because as children, there are times when we didn't get our needs met because our parents were just doing the best they could, or that perhaps they weren't aware of it, or, there's a whole lot of life that goes on within it. And I think that because we all have these little traumas that go on, we often go through the world being activated by them, and we're quite unaware that we're actually getting activated. And I think one of the beautiful things we can do as humans is start to be curious as to where we get activated, what goes on for us, what are we making it mean? And when we can have that awareness around ourselves, and I think it also helps us to have more awareness in different spaces that we create, whether that's schooling, whether that's a workplace environment, whether it's our home. It's about just being curious of the human who's in front of us and perhaps the story that's come before them.
When I'm out in the world, try to remind myself that everybody has a story. Everybody, we as, me here as Jodi, in my world, I could sort of picture myself as the sun with all of the people in my world revolving around me. I'm the center of my world and you're the center of your world. And we have lots and lots of people revolving around us, and we have our own stories, our own experiences, our own traumas, our own way of operating. And every single person is in that same, is the same. And so if we can come to people in the world with kindness and curiosity and compassion, then I think it's a really beautiful kind of default approach to life, and particularly for us as adults when we're working with children and with parents like you and I are. But this idea that we bring to each day what's come before us, and we often can't change what's come before us. But like you were saying, this idea that kind of understanding what life was like for us being raised and what we'd experienced. And when you said about the broken vase, that really struck a chord with me because I grew up with a highly, highly anxious mum. And I speak about anyone who I speak about from my family, I speak about with permission. And so, but what I opted to do in my family was when something got broken or something got spilt, it was like, oh, well, all right, what should we do next? Okay, all right, well, that was an accident. Okay, well, the whole idea, you spill of the milk, you clean up of the milk kind of thing. It's like when something goes wrong, I've tried to operate in a different way. I've tried to take that learning and do things differently. This whole idea that, we can only do the best we can with what we've got, and when we know better, we do better. I think that the compassion I know you share for parents on this learning journey shines through in your work. What would you say to parents who are listening to this conversation and feel like, oh, golly, I've yelled when the vase is broken, or I've, got really cranky when the text has gone on the wall, or, when other things have happened, to people who might be feeling like, hey, I've got it wrong and aren't feeling good about perhaps some of the ways they've operated in the past?
The first thing is that there is no perfect and nobody has it all right. And I'm a wonderful mum. I've been a mum for 23 years now, but I have messed up in every way possible, like everybody else out there, right? Because it is sometimes through that messing up and when we do things in ways that don't feel good that we actually then go, oh, here's an edge for me and this doesn't feel good, and what do I need to look at? And as humans, we're not very good at moving unless we've got tension there, unless there is some conflict or there's something that we're pushing up against that makes us go, yeah, this doesn't feel good and I want to change it. So I think the first thing is we have to take a deep breath and go, we are all doing the best job we know how, which we are. And, as I mentioned kind of at the beginning, we often end up parenting the way we've been parented, or we make a conscious effort to swing really far in the other direction to make sure that our children don't feel how we felt. But sometimes we can overcorrect. Sometimes, if we grew up in an environment where there was a lot of anger or yelling, or it felt often unsafe, we can become parents and go, I never want my children to feel like that. So we try and make our kids happy all the time, and we become really permissive, and we don't often set boundaries or hold limits because we're scared of upsetting them, or we don't want, we don't know how to deal with what happens if they don't get what they want. And so we kind of can become too permissive. So, we all sit in different places on the spectrum. And I always come back to this, to reminding parents that hey, it's easy to be a good parent when there's money in the bank and, you've had a full night's sleep and someone's made you dinner and all your washing's folded. And,
Hmm.
we can be the playful parent we want to be. But that's not the reality a lot of the time. A lot of the time we're living in pretty stressed environments where we're having to hustle a lot. Our world is pretty chaotic, and it's hard to be that present, connected, playful parent when we're not getting our needs met, and also when we're dealing with a lot of stresses. So I think the first thing we need to do is not make it about I'm wrong and I'm bad and I'm messing it up, but just actually take a breath and go, whoa, the world that I'm parenting at the moment is not an easy one. There's a lot of stress and there's a lot of balls in the air. And I don't think we were meant to parent by ourselves in our own little houses, especially if you've got little kids. You're not meant to be with those little children for 12 and 14 hours a day by yourself. We need other adults, we need other connections. And it's really hard. Like, parenting is one of the hardest jobs we do. So I think we have to kind of pull back a bit and go, you know what, we're parenting in a world at the moment where we're lacking a lot of support. And then I think we're also being indoctrinated into this belief system as parents that we should be able to do it all and we should have it all together and our kids should be beautifully presented and our house should be clean and they should be doing great at school and we should be kicking, butt at our job and all that kind of stuff. And again, that is not the reality for a lot of people. And so then what we do is we make ourselves wrong, or we think we're not enough. Whereas again, we're trying to keep all the balls in the air that perhaps aren't meant to be all in the air. So I think the first thing is we have to come back to a place of compassion for ourselves to go, this is a tough gig that we're doing and we're not always going to get it right. But when we do mess up, which we all do at some point, we do have the opportunity for healing and repair. And we do have the opportunity to self-reflect and go, yeah, that didn't feel good. And I often find that there's usually kind of three reasons why we find it really hard to meet our kids emotionally. Like, the first is because we're not getting our needs met. And that usually means if we haven't had enough sleep, or we need a break, or, we need someone to listen to us because we're feeling really overwhelmed. When we haven't got our own needs met, it is hard to be the parent we want to be. So it's like the whole airplane analogy. We have to take care of our needs first so we can turn up and be the parent we want to be. And the second reason I think why we can find it really hard to meet our kids emotionally, or why we respond in reactive ways, has got a lot to do with what we're telling ourselves. And if we have a pretty strong narrative in our head that says, oh gosh, why can't my son just be good like his sister? Or, if he was good, then it would make my life easier. Or, if I was a better parent, then they'd be well behaved. When we've got a strong narrative that's telling ourselves something, it can be really hard to find empathy for our children and to meet them from that connected place, because we've got a bit of a mental loop going on. And then the third reason I find why we often can be really reactive is because of our own past traumas and hurts and the way we were raised. And I'm sure you agree with this, Jodi. Whether we like it or not, when we become parents, our own baggage is going to come to the surface. It just is. It just has to.
Yeah.
We are going to be confronted by all the stuff around how we were raised, whether we were shut down or supported, or perhaps we were smacked, or maybe we were criticized or judged. Our beautiful children come along and they're like this fabulous little mirror that says, hey, mum, hey, dad, here's your wounds that you need to deal with. And I often find that the more reactive we get around things, and if we can kind of go through that bit of a checklist, is it because I just need a break, or is it because I've got, this thought going on, or is it connected to the fact that when I was little, I didn't get my needs met, or perhaps I was highly criticized when I was a kid, or, we all will have threads back to our own wounds that surface. And I really do believe that our children are there going, hey, I need you guys to sort out your stuff so you don't project it onto me, because that's what we often end up doing. We often end up taking our wounds from our past and our hurt, and we end up projecting it onto our kids. And I think this is, again, why we have to have so much compassion for ourselves, because our parents weren't perfect. They were doing the best they could with the tools they had at the time, and that was probably better than what was done to them. And each generation, I think we get a bit more wiser and we get a bit more aware. And changing these strong imprints and traumas is can be really big work, and if we grew up in an environment where we were yelled at a lot, or it was, there's a lot of shaming, it takes a lot of courage to do it differently. And it takes a bit of work to kind of process our own hurts and wounds to go, hey, I'm not going to do that. I want to do it differently for my kids. So I say to parents often, when we are trying to parent consciously, it's like learning to speak a brand new language. And if we grew up in a house that only spoke English, well, learning to parent consciously is like learning to speak Italian. And it's tricky, and you're not fluent in it in the beginning, and you have to practice a lot. And then you got to hang out with other people who speak Italian. And the more you chat with them about it, the more it begins to make sense. And then the more we practice, we begin to find some flow with it. And then after a lot of practice, we realize, hey, I can speak fluent Italian. And then the beautiful thing from that is then our kids grow up speaking Italian. They grow up going, hey, this is what's normal to me: compassion, empathy, understanding, curiosity, not blaming myself. All those kind of things is what we then pass on to our beautiful kiddos. And that's where we see the shift. So I think we have to be so kind to ourselves if we are this first generation of trying to bring some awareness and consciousness to what we're doing. It's really big and it's tricky. And that's why when we mess up, we've got to be kind to ourselves. We've got to go repair with our beautiful kiddos, because repairing makes such a difference for them. If we can own our behavior and repair with them, again, it decreases trauma that they might carry from it. And then we keep growing and learning and remember that we're all doing the best we can.
Oh, goodness, Lael. Thank you for your insights and your heart and your experience, and for sharing that with us here, because as a daughter of parents whose parenting I reflect on, as a parent myself, and as a mum who just had to repair with a child just a couple of nights ago when I overreacted in terms of a consequence, and then I'll come back to that, but and somebody who, like all of our listeners today, Lael, as you said before, you're a wonderful mum, but you've done almost everything, that you hang on, I'll say that again, that you're a wonderful mum, but you've made your mistakes along the way as well. I am a wonderful mum. I was going to almost say I consider myself, I know I am a wonderful mum, but I make lots of mistakes as well. There's no perfect parent. There's no, we are human, we are fallible, and in our challenges as a parent, we're still teaching our kids as really important messages. As the other night when I was chatting to our kids aren't allowed to have their phones in their bedroom, and our daughter had popped her phone on charge in her room for the night, and it's been an ongoing conversation, and there was just this frustration in me that the repetitiveness of the instructions sometimes can become frustrating, and I'm like, oh, if I see this again, I'm really frustrated. We've spoken about this so many times. If I do see this again, I'm going to take your phone for 2 days. And then I walked out and thought, well, I'm not going to do that. That's and then we not before have we had not a disagreement, I suppose. It wasn't really an argument or a fight, but I went to bed, she went to bed in a half, I went to bed in a bit of a half, feeling upset that we hadn't had our usual kiss and hug, and then I couldn't sleep, and I got up to take a break and watch a little bit of TV, just to sort of, settle myself, and she was up. She couldn't sleep either because she was upset, and I sat down on the couch beside her straight away and said, oh, hey, hun, I'm really sorry about before I overreacted. I've shared a consequence that certainly I'm not going to stand by now. I just was feeling frustrated at the time, and I'm sorry. She said, I'm sorry too. I know not to. And I said, oh, all right, well, let's have a chat about it tomorrow. How about we just chill out now? We both kind of wind ourselves down, and let's agree to have these conversations away from bedtime. And it was so lovely. And we sat up and we watched a few funny things on YouTube, and then we went to bed. And so, please, listeners, as you're hearing Lael and I talking, and despite the fact that anybody that you listen to who works in the parenting space, we've learned a lot over the time, but we certainly we're certainly imperfect parents, and always learning and growing as well along with you. So one of the things that Lael, that you talked about was this self-compassion, and I just really wanted to remind listeners that it is a kindness to ourselves that is an incredible, incredible gift. And the 3 parts to to sort of just refresh your memory, the idea that what I'm doing is hard. I don't think there is really a harder job than parenting. It's ever changing, and that you are not alone. There is a world of parents. There are a world of parents, if that's correct English, around you, and finding your village, like you were saying. We're not meant to do this alone. And this idea that we can be kind to ourselves, we can be forgiving to ourselves, we can say to ourselves what we would say to a beautiful friend who had been through the same experience as us. This is hard, I'm not alone, and treat ourselves with kindness can go a really long way. And it's also something we can model for our kids. Every time we are learning and growing, we're also teaching them more Italian, aren't we?
Oh, I love that you said that, because there is so much power in the repair that you had with your daughter, because not only have you owned your piece in it, which is so powerful for a child, because when they see us go, hey, that was on me and I behaved in that way and that's mine to own, then it takes away from them having a story that says, oh gosh, it's my fault, mum's like this, or dad responded in that way. But it also models to them what it is to own our behavior, which is what we want our kiddos to do. And the second thing, you've just done the most beautiful repair with her, which again teaches her how to repair with others when she makes a mistake. And that's really powerful. I mean, and it isn't an excuse to just yell and scream all day and then go, I'll just repair and it'll be fine. I mean, ideally, we don't want to have to do that. But there is so much beautiful modeling in what you've done as well, because that is a very tricky thing for a lot of adults to do, to own when they make a mistake, to be accountable for what they've done, because they've never been shown how to do it. One of the things that was probably so powerful my husband and I did when our kids were younger, and I reckon they were probably about 7 or 8, I remember saying to all of them at different times, if you ever feel that dad and I are speaking to you and we're not coming from our heart, and we're really out of balance, then I give you permission to call us out on it, which is a huge thing to say to a kid, right? Because you're like, I think parents are like, oh God, no way, what does that mean? But I'm like, they deserve as much respect as what we do, and they're human. And so we would say to them, if we are yelling or we're talking, then we give you permission to say you're not speaking from your heart. And I have to tell you, the first few times it happened, it stopped both my husband and I in our tracks, and we were like, you are right. And we're like, we're going to take a time out, and we'd go outside or we would take a break to calm down and tune into what our feelings were, so that we could come back and then have a conversation from the calm, connected place in us. It was a really powerful thing. And I think for me, I've watched that with my 3 kids, to empower them to actually say, I don't really like the way you're talking to me. We need to, there's something going on for you here, right? You need to own that. And because kids are so all over that. I mean, they know when we are out of balance, right?
Okay.
And of course, they often move into defense of themselves. And it was a really powerful thing to do. And look, I'm not suggesting that every parent should do that with their kids. I think it depends on your children. And I think it's also looking at what you value in your family. But for me, speaking our truth and speaking from our heart, from a place where we were connected and compassionate and kind with each other, has always been a really important thing. So we've wanted to model that, but also we've given our kids permission to call us out on that if we need to. And really, the only times they've ever called us out on it is when it's been really warranted, actually. And and that's where I've seen, gosh, it's really powerful to help them also know that, hey, you don't have to be spoken to in a way that doesn't feel good for you. You are allowed to actually say, no, that doesn't feel good for me.
Thank you, Lael, for sharing the conversations that you've had with all of your children around this idea. And it brings to mind something my mum always said to me, which is that we teach people how to treat us, and giving our kids permission and the language to be able to recognise when they are not being spoken to the way that they deserve to be spoken to, and to have the permission to be able to say something is not only something that they can carry through family life, but also into other aspects of their life where they might need to assert themselves or protect their boundaries. Yes. And so I recognise when you share something like this with your children, it's a very vulnerable thing to say. And like you say, it's just part of this new language. It's just more Italian. And whenever we're learning something as parents, for parents listening today who are thinking, wow, there's so many really powerful ideas here. You don't have to dive in deep and just make everything in a second language and flounder. It's about, taking small steps towards change. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. It's something I want to be able to share with my family, and I really feel as though it empowers our children in so many ways, and really it does treat them the way that they deserve to be treated, because and we want to treat them the way we want other people to treat them.
Yeah, and I often think that I do think we sometimes treat children like second-class citizens. I think that sometimes I see this in our education system, and I know our system is pretty stretched at the moment, but sometimes the way we talk to children in schools and stuff like that is so not okay, right? They're just humans, and they're doing the best they can in the environment that they're in a lot of the time. I mean, I have had my kids, have shared with me times when perhaps a teacher's been really angry or yelling, and my child has calmly just said, I think you need to take a break, or the way you're speaking to us is not going to help any of us. Like, has actually called them out on it, which I'm so proud of them for, because they know that the way to get the best out of someone is to connect with them and to be calm and to talk about what's going on. But that screaming and yelling, they're like, it's not going to work on me, and it's just making me see that you're feeling a bit out of balance and out of control, and what do you need? Now that power imbalance often between educators and children can be pretty big. And yet I feel so proud that my kids have been able to do that, because they're like, it's not okay sometimes when adults talk to kids that way, because they deserve to be spoken to with calmness. And I'm like, yes. And I also understand sometimes as adults and as with children, when we feel stretched, when we haven't got our needs met, when our nervous system's at capacity, we do react and respond. But, my mission, particularly with my own children and anyone I work with, is to help us own our own feelings. When we are angry and we're projecting that onto someone else, and that's where we need to take a pause and go, what's going on here for me?
Yes.
Because we've grown up in a society where we think it's acceptable to just get all our crap and project it onto someone else. And I think that's where we need to go. It's not okay. Actually, we need to learn to lean into our own stories and our own feelings to help shift it.
We absolutely do. And it's a perfect place for me to ask you what you can share with our listeners today when it comes to, it speaks to the most beautiful emotional regulation of the child of yours that had the courage and the confidence and the centering to be able to share calmly that insight in that classroom. And so when it comes to emotional intelligence and helping us as parents develop more emotional intelligence, we've spoken a lot about ourselves as parents. What can we do for our children when you talk about feelings the way that you do, and the insights perhaps that you could share with our listeners today that are practical and maybe a place to start?
Well, I think when we're looking at emotional intelligence, one of the first things we need to look at is we want to let our children know that all feelings are valid and welcome. I think for a long time, we've grown up in a bit of a paradigm that says anger and sadness and upset and frustration is not okay, and we just need to be happy all the time, or, we just will go with positive feelings. I'm like, there's no such thing as positive and negative. They're just feelings, right? And so I think we've been taught that it's, not okay to get angry, not okay to cry, all that kind of stuff, and we need to just shut it down. Whereas actually they are just parts of being human. They are very normal. We all get angry, we all get frustrated, we all feel sad. And I think when we are looking at emotional intelligence for children, we want to create safe spaces for them to feel those feelings in a way that is safe. It's not projected onto anyone else, but they're able to feel it, get the support they need, and then let it go. To me, that's the idea. Now, for most of us as adults, we have grown up in a behaviorism paradigm, which is really kind of spoken to, when you're good, we reward you, and when you're bad, we take something away from you. And, I still really do question that whole belief system around, do we need to make someone feel bad in order to make them behave better? Because often it actually just creates more shame and hurt and trauma. And then before we know it, we've just got a bigger backpack of feelings that we're trying to offload. And I think when we're looking at emotional intelligence, we've got to come back to this place of going, emotional intelligence for me is where a child or a human is able to identify, I feel angry right now. what do I need to do? I need to go move my body. I need to go for a run. I need to put on some music and shake it out. I need to go and speak to someone to let them know that I'm feeling so fired up about something, or my boundaries have been crossed. We want them to be able to identify, I'm out of balance right now. There's some feelings sitting here for me. And what do I need to do to move them to find my way back into balance? So when we can develop this beautiful understanding and literacy around feelings and emotions, and we're able to own them in our bodies, then we're less likely to project them onto others. We're less likely to act out in ways. We're less likely to behave in ways that can be destructive, because we're able to own, gosh, I feel really sad at the moment. And what do I do when I feel sad? Well, I sometimes need to have a cry, or I'm going to reach out to a friend because I feel better when I speak to them, or I'm going to move my body and do some yoga, or I'm going to go for a gentle walk, or I'm just going to wrap myself up in a blanket and be really kind to myself right now because this is how I feel. So we're not making feelings wrong. We're just owning them. We're able to process them in a way that's healthy. Now, the more that we can do that, and the more we're aware of that, the more we develop empathy, that we're able to then attune to others and be there for them when something like that happens. Or we're able to see when somebody is out of balance, and we're able to go, hey, do you need something? Or, do you need me to listen? So this is where we're developing this emotional awareness and emotional intelligence to be able to identify what's happening inside of us. And then we're attuned enough to see when it's happening in others as well. And so for me, the most important part of being able to develop that skill is knowing that our feelings are welcome. And we learn that when we're little kiddos. We learn that, hey, I feel really sad. I can have a big cry, and a parent doesn't kind of swoop in and go, shh, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, like it's okay. And again, I absolutely understand why many people do that. It's because it wasn't safe for them to cry when they were little. So we try anything we can do to stop it, right?
Yes.
Because our default is to try and fix. We want someone to feel better. But I think the job is not about making them feel better. It's about sitting beside them in the hard, uncomfortable, and saying, hey, I'm right here with you, and let it out, and it will pass, because it will. And I love you just the way you are. That I think is the ultimate goal. So as parents, when our child is angry, can we be curious and look behind the anger and go, oof, there's something brewing here. How can I meet them in this anger and not make it wrong, but give them and guide them to healthy ways to move that anger so it can move through their body? And I think that when we are aware enough to be able to look at our kiddos, and I often say our job is to kind of scan our kids when they walk in the room. If we can scan them and go, well, where are they right now? Are they in balance? Are they feeling good? Are they feeling connected? Is their nervous system calm? Well, then they're probably going to cooperate and things will feel good. But if they're out of balance, which means they're walking into the room and they're picking a fight with their sister, or you can see they're really fired up about something, or they're just constantly complaining about how something's not fair, then there's something there. They're waving a red flag saying, hey, I need something to help me come back into balance. And sometimes that's connection from us. Sometimes it's a cuddle. Sometimes it's a need like food and just helping them with something. Or sometimes it's about some playfulness and just connection because they haven't seen us. Or sometimes it's about setting a limit around something where they can then push up against it and they get to have a big cry and offload those feelings, and then they're back in balance. So I think our job is to constantly be curious as parents, to always look behind the behavior and go, oh, what's happening? Where are they? What's going on? And how can I be that beautiful anchored parent to hold them as they are learning how to navigate their big feelings and emotions? Because it takes time for us to learn how to do it. And then again, the reason why it can feel so challenging for us as parents is because most of us were not taught how to do it for ourselves.
Yes, it can be so hard, can't it? Our hearts can break the moment we see that look on their faces. We pick them up from school, or that they've come out of their room, or they've been at a friend's, and we know that something's not right. They're not feeling in balance, as you say, and that they're feeling emotions. Sometimes they'll share those with us, and sometimes they won't. And it can be so painful for us. And so one of the things I'd love for you to share with us is for parents who, are picturing, the next time that their child is distressed and really needs a parent to sort of sit with them in that discomfort and be there for them and validate how they feel and share their empathy. What would you encourage parents to do to sort of monitor and manage their own distress in that moment so we don't jump into fix-it mode, which is so instinctive?
Yeah, it is instinctive, isn't it? Well, I think the first thing we've got to take a deep breath and remember that our job is to be the anchor amongst the storm.
Mm.
And, I think it's a really powerful thing as a simple place is if you've got a little 5-year-old who's sitting there saying, no one played with me today, or it's your 10-year-old who didn't get picked in the basketball team. And, part of you is like, oh God, no, this feels terrible. Is just, if you can, bring enough awareness to, all right, if I was 5 or if I was 10, what would I need right now?
Mm.
Would I need a parent to swoop in and say, don't worry about it, it'll be fine, it'll be fine? Or someone to jump in and try and, I'm going to ring the coach and fix it for you? Or, what would we want really? And most of the time, I know the answer to that question is we would want an adult to sit there and say, oh gosh, this sounds so hard. And I'm right here with you, and let it out. And, I'm here and I love you, even though this feels tough. Because when we're able to do that, and we're able to sit beside them, particularly in the hard stuff, we're sending them a message that says, A, you're not alone and I'm right here with you. But B, I trust in your ability to navigate this hard thing. I mean, this is how we build resilience, right? When we have to be in the hard thing, lean into it, feel it, and then we get to move through it. Now, it's so much easier for us to do it when we have a loving, compassionate person sitting beside us.
Yeah.
I mean, the most challenging thing, as you mentioned, is wanting to fix it, because that person we love is in pain, and that feels painful for us. So we don't want them to feel pain, so we can just jump in and fix it. But we actually don't do our children any service. We don't do our children any good sometimes when we jump in to fix. And it doesn't mean that sometimes we don't need to get involved. Of course, there's times where things are too big for kids and we need to step in. But when there's those, little hurts, or there's stuff that feels challenging, the first step is always to just listen. Listen without fixing, listen without getting into the drama with them, and listening without judging, just being there, nodding a lot, saying, gosh, that sounds hard, and tell me more, and then just listening. Yeah. And then at the end, I often say, when they have finished, being upset, you could say to them, do you want a suggestion, or did you want me to just listen? Now, if they say to you, I want you to just listen, then we don't jump in with the, okay, but this is what I think you should do.
Yeah.
We just listen. And, I have found this from, raising my kids into adulthood. The more we can listen, particularly when they're little, the more it sets up a foundation for them that says, hey, I can bring my big stuff to you. Because I think it is so important, particularly when our kids get into those teenage years, when they know that you will listen to them and you're not going to fix, that when things are tough, when they're at a party and something goes wrong or something else is going on, their narrative is going to be, let's ring my parents, they'll know what to say, as opposed to, gosh, I hope my parents don't find out. And so much of that comes from the beautiful connection and listening that we have to practice a lot of when they're younger.
I remember being a new mum and reading some very wise words that said, along the lines of, and I'm sure you've heard this before, Lael, that it's really important we listen when they bring us the little stuff, and that way they'll tell us when it's the big stuff. But to them, it's always big stuff.
Yes.
And I remember, I'm so glad I came across that when my children were young. They're 13 and 15 now, 15-year-old boy, 13-year-old girl. And yes, and so even though I don't get it right all the time, like every other parent, when they share things with me, and just yesterday, one of my kids shared something with me that my face must have said it all, because it was the sharing of something that a friend, and I'm using sort of quotation marks, had done, where this person had operated not in the way a friend would operate. And this child, who's remaining genderless in this conversation, so people who know won't know the details, said to me, it's okay, I just need to know I can tell you. There's nothing else you need to do.
Oh,
and I was like, oh, you're so wise. Yes. And like any parent, you're sensitive to it. So it takes time and it takes practice. And I love that this teenager of mine was able to say that, which showed such maturity, and it gives me such hope that I'm doing, getting it right most of the time.
Yes, I love that. And I think so many times through the teenage years, when my kids would tell me something big, I would actually, again, I'd be in that like, what? And I'd just try to keep a really neutral face. And I'd say something like, thank you so much for telling me. I'm going to come back to you about this. And I'd have to actually go and speak to a friend or my partner and just go, oh my gosh, they just told me this, told me that. I had to go freak out somewhere else
Yes.
and get it all out so then I could come back and be really neutral for my kids. And that
Yeah.
that is such a really good thing to do, is that
Yeah.
when we feel activated, when we feel scared, when we feel like we're getting into our own stuff, is take it somewhere else so we can kind of decompress, we can get it out, we can process what's there for us, and then we can come back and have the conversation. And look, that's not as easy to do when you've got little people, because when you try and take time out and go to the toilet or wash your hands, they usually follow you. So that doesn't work as well. But when you have
Yes.
kids that are a bit bigger,
Mm.
one of the greatest things we can do as a parent is actually take a time out for ourselves, is just to say, hey, I'll be back in a minute. And there's been many times I've gone and rung a listening partner or a friend and said, I just need you to listen to me talk about this because I'm really activated about it, or I'm really freaking out and I need to just get it all out so that I can find my center and then come back and be that anchor for my children. So it's so normal to have those feelings and reactions, and I think it's important that we kind enough to ourselves to go, whoa, that feels really big. I need to go and process it first before I can continue on.
Oh, I love this freaking out somewhere else and taking that time out. I love that. Freak out far away if we can. and having someone to talk to and like you say, just having that opportunity to regulate how we are. And but before we finish, I want to come back sort of to something you've just said and something you said at the beginning. You just mentioned that word anchor again, that we can be the anchor in the storm. And Timber Hawkeye, I'm full of quotes today. That we can't calm the storm, so stop trying. What we can do is calm ourselves. The storm will pass. And I love that idea, but easier said than done. And at the start, you were saying it's the truth. And as adults, as parents, we're often juggling a lot of balls, and we've got a lot of different things happening in our lives where we're trying to manage, and being that anchor isn't always easy. And so I just, perhaps before we finish up, just some brief parting thoughts on what you might say to a parent who's like, oh my gosh, I'm struggling to keep my head above water, let alone be the anchor. What might you say?
Yeah, well, I think, the first thing is recognizing it, is just to be like, yep, this feels really big for me. And then I think, I often think, we're all individual and we have to tune into what feels good for us. But for me as a parent, one of the most powerful practices I've had is having a listening partner, is a friend who's a mom who had kids similar ages. And when things felt really big, I'd just text her and go, can you listen to me for 10 minutes? Or, I'd leave a voice note for her. And really, it was just an opportunity to have someone who was on the other end of the phone who'd go, okay, go, tell me. And she wouldn't try and fix me and she wouldn't judge me. She would just listen. And sometimes I would cry or swear or whatever. I'd just get it out so that I felt heard. And, at the end of me kind of venting or whatever, she'd be like, you're doing a great job. I'm here. So when I felt heard, it increased my capacity to then hear my children and sit in their hard stuff. I learned pretty early on when my kids are little, it's really hard to meet our kids in that emotional storm if we are not getting our needs met. So whether that is just time, whether it's our own listening, it's like almost impossible to do. If our cup is so full and we are not meeting our needs, it's very hard to turn up for our kids in that way. So I really learned, if I want to be an emotionally stable parent, I have to take my stuff somewhere else. Now, over some periods of time, that was therapy because a lot of my own stuff was triggered, and again, you're probably aware of this too, Jodi. I always joke that when you have teenagers, it's like you get to go through puberty all over again and all your own stuff comes up.
Yes.
So definitely when my kids started to go through those teenage years, I was like, whoa, here's a whole lot of Lael from, teenage Lael that was needing to be healed. And I needed to go and talk to someone about it. All my fears came up and all my kind of baggage. And so there were times where I went and did therapy around what was present, what was being reflected in my kids. I had to own some of that. There were other times just listening. A beautiful listening partner was a massive difference. And the same, I did the same for her. She would text me and say, oh, I'm having a hard time, can you listen? And I'd be like, yep. And I'd get on the phone and I would literally just listen and just say, I'm here, keep going. What else? Tell me more. And I didn't need to fix and I didn't need to offer advice. I was just there to hold that space, which is, again, what we're trying to do with our kids. So I think, we're all different, but I think listening is so powerful if we can get someone to listen to us. I think we also need to tune into, what does my body need right now? Does it need to run? Does it need to shake? Does it need to dance? Does it need to cry? Like, what do we need to do to move the stuff that we hold in our bodies? Because again, we hold on to so much. So when we can do that as well, that can make a massive difference. And again, we're coming back to that same word of compassion again, like have compassion for ourselves. It's not easy parenting this way, and it's also not easy being a parent in the world that we live in. So the more we can be compassionate to ourselves, the more we'll then be compassionate to others and our kids. So it's big. I just think all parents need the biggest hug and to go, you're doing a good job. It's big. You're changing generational patterns and you're dealing with the crazy world that we're living in. And, we've got all these balls in the air, and we have to be kind to ourselves. And on the days we mess up, don't keep beating yourself up for it. Just go, today, I didn't turn up in the best way I know, and that's okay. And so tomorrow I'm going to do better. And I think if we can keep doing that and we can keep being kind and compassionate, then we're doing amazing. We're doing amazing.
I agree. And I think this conversation has felt like a beautiful, big, warm hug for every parent listening. And I just can't thank you enough for sharing just a small part of your expertise and wisdom and warmth and compassion and just life lessons along your own journey, as well as your own personal as well as your professional journey. So Lael, how can people connect and work with you? Tell us about where they can contact you and find out more.
Thank you. Well, I often say the only benefit of being given a weird name is that when you Google Lael Stone, I am the only person that turns up. So that's a pretty good thing. So my website, which is laelstone.com.au, I've got lots of webinars and courses and stuff on there that people can access. I have a book called Raising Resilient and Compassionate Children, so you can find that on the website as well. And look for this next year. My second book is about to come out. I'm not sure when yet, but that's all about our imprints, what happened to us as kids, and then how that impacts how we parent, how we go through life, relationships, work, all that stuff. So that'll be coming out this year. And we'll have some new courses attached to that as well. So I'm on social media at Lael Stone and, all the kind of normal, regular places.
Oh, wonderful. And it's Lael, in case you weren't sure about the spelling. Lael, thank you so much for joining me and, for just sharing the way that you have. I know that this episode is one that is going to be one that parents will not only love listening to, but they'll come back to, because I think each time we listen to this episode, there's just going to be another little nugget that we can sort of put into our toolbox to start, practicing that Italian, another few words, another few phrases to stick with that metaphor. But it's just been a really beautiful conversation. I thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Jodi.
Thanks, Lael, and thank you for listening. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Well, Hello, Anxiety. I cannot wait to be back with you again next week. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.